Today we're going to talk about building a boat, part 2. The cost of a vision. The cost of vision. See, if an organization has a mission statement, the mission statement is what tells you this is what we stand for and this is what we're going to do. This is who we are as an organization. That's our mission. This is what we stand for. But your vision statement is very different. Your vision statement says this is where we are going to go. If I were to pull up in the front of your house, open up my car door and say, hey, yo, get in, let's go. The very first question you're probably going to ask me is this: where are we going? That's my first question. Depends on my mood. Sometimes I'm like, all right, I'm up for a good time, let's go. But the very first question I'm going to ask is this: where are we about to go? We don't just hop in cars with people without knowing the destination. Before you get in, you want to know, where are we headed? And so one of the most important things as a pastor that I can do is to tell the church, this is the direction that we are about to go. We've come a long way since September. And as you recall, when I first got here and took over as pastor, on Wednesday nights, we had vision casting meetings where we began to talk about the future of this church and where we are about to go. So we're going to take the next couple weeks and we're going to talk about the vision of this house. We're going to take the next couple weeks and we're going to discuss vision. But the first part of vision is this: vision costs something. There is a cost to having a vision. So if you would, turn your Bibles with me this morning to the book of Genesis, chapter 6, and we're going to start with verse 17. Genesis 6 and 17. If you can, please stand for the reading of the word. And the word of the Lord reads this: Look, I'm about to cover the earth with a flood that will destroy every living thing that breathes. Everything on earth will die, but I will confirm my covenant with you. So enter the boat, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that stirs along the ground will come to you to be kept alive. And be sure to take on board enough food for your family and all the animals. So Noah did everything exactly as God commanded him. For a companion text, I'm going to go to the book of Luke, chapter 14, 28 and 30. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money. And then everyone would laugh at you. They would say, there's the person who started that building and couldn't afford to finish it. You may be seated. The cost of a vision. In Genesis, we're recounting the story of Noah. It said that humanity had become increasingly violent. And God said, all right, I'm going to destroy everything. Everything that breathes, I'm about to destroy. But he said, Noah, you are a righteous man, and I will save you, and I'll save your family, and that's it. So I need you to build a boat for me. So God gave Noah the mandate: I need you to begin to build this boat. And not only do I need you to build it, but then you have to fill it with every kind of animal on this earth. And then you have to fill it with enough food for you and the animals to survive. When God gives you a vision, it's going to cost you something. When God has placed a dream in your heart, it's going to require something of you. God gave Noah the mandate: this is what I need you to do. Now, There was something that Noah had to go out and do. Noah first had to get the wood that was required in order to build this ark. And then he had to gather enough food for him and these animals as well. Can you imagine God giving you that kind of a mandate? I need you to build this boat. But you're also going to have to get all the material you need. You're also going to have to make sure that you have enough food to feed you and every kind of animal, a pair of every kind of animal on this earth that breathes. That is an incredible mandate. That is a huge task, a huge undertaking. And I'm sure it took something from Noah. If you go to the book of Luke, Jesus is having a conversation. And he tells them, if you want to be my disciples, count the cost. You say you want to be my disciples. You say you want to follow me. But before you make any agreement, count the cost first. Because to follow me and to be my disciple, it will cost you something. Jesus told them you have to hate your father and your mother and your brother and your sister and your husband and your wife. That word doesn't mean to hate them like I hate you or despise you. It means to just simply love less. You have to love them less than you love me. And if you can do that, you can be my disciple. But he said, count the cost first. When we think of cost of something, the very first thing that comes to mind is what? Dollars and cents. If I'm going to go do something, the first thing I want to know is how much is this going to cost? As you can recall, when we had our vision casting meetings, we talked about that we were going to do a remodel around the church. And I gave you a figure of exactly what this project was going to cost. Why? Because I had done research. I couldn't just do a project without knowing how much everything was going to cost us. Or guess what would happen? We would run out of money, and it would happen very quickly. So we created a budget to know exactly how much everything was going to cost. No one just decides that I'm going to build a house. I'm going to build this house, I'm going to buy this land, and then I'm just going to start building. No, you have to have a plan behind what it is that you're about to do. When it comes to vision, it doesn't just mean, all right, today I'm going to go and I'm going to do this. What is the plan that goes behind it? When God spoke with Noah, he said, Noah, this is how I want you to do it. And God gave him a very specific plan on how he was to build this boat. And then this is what you are going to do. Fill it with enough food. Get 2 of every kind of animal. This is the plan that I have for you. But it cost Noah something. Sometimes a vision is going to cost you money. Sometimes God is going to ask you to dip into your own resources in order to make something happen. But how many people know that if God asks you to give something, he's not going to just take from you. He's going to give you something greater in return. God doesn't just take from us. God doesn't ask us for stuff just because God wants to take or God doesn't have. No, it's an opportunity for God to pour back into us. If someone says, hey, I got something for you, hold out your hand, and I give them my fist, guess what? I can't receive anything until I first let go. And sometimes when God says, I need you to do this, God doesn't need our resources. He doesn't need our money. He doesn't even need us. But he gives us an opportunity to be a part of what he's doing as long as we're willing. And we say yes. And so the first thing we think, how much is this going to cost me monetarily? But the next thing that we don't think about is this: time is also a resource. In fact, do you know that time is the most valuable resource that we have? I can always get more money, but I'll never get more time. And sometimes what God asks us to do, it's going to require us to give up our time, which is the most valuable resource we have, because once it's spent, you never get it back again. 100 years, they estimated that Noah spent building the ark, gathering the materials, doing what God asked him to do. 100 years of his life was dedicated to this task that God asked him to do. That's a lot of time. It's a lot of time that he put into building this ark. But the reward for it was that him and his family would be saved from this flood. When we think of time, the one thing that we always think about is this: what does it cost to make it happen? What does it cost to make the dream that God has given you happen? What does obedience cost me? And so often we're afraid to be obedient to God because we think, what does it cost me if I do this? God, you've called me into ministry, but what do I have to give up in order to walk with you? God, you called me to be a church greeter, but what do I have to give up in order to do this? God has given us a vision of a church, but what does it cost us in order to make it happen? We always think about what I have to give up. But what we never think about is this: what does it cost if I don't do it? It's going to cost no matter what. Obedience to God costs you something, but disobedience also costs something. When I go to the gym, it costs me something to go to the gym. I have to pay for my gym membership. I have to give up my time. It's going to cost me some gas, and then I'm going to have to go in and actually work my body out. It costs me something. I'm going to be sore the next day. But the cost of not going to the gym is even greater. I become overweight. I become sluggish. I can't keep up with my children. I lose my strength. I become sick. So whether I go to the gym or I don't go to the gym, it's going to cost me no matter what. And whenever we walk with Jesus and God has put something in our lives and deposited a vision and a dream and a goal deep within our heart, it costs something. Whether I do it or whether I don't, I have to give up something. Noah could have said, God, this task is too much for me to endure. This job is too much for me to bear. You're asking me to give up so much of my life. But what was the cost of not building the ark? Everyone would have been wiped out. And Noah would have died and his whole family. The cost of not doing it was greater than the cost of building that ark. When you have a goal and you have a vision and God has called you to something, not only will God call you to it, but God will provide for you as well. If you notice, Noah had the task of getting 2 of every pair of animal on that ark. I don't know about you, but anybody ever had a puppy before? Better yet, a cat? Try to make a cat do something you don't want it to do. Try to make your puppy do something you don't want it to do. It is darn near impossible. And you know how long it takes to actually train them to do what you want them to do? Now imagine trying to get an elephant into a boat. Imagine trying to get a lion into a cage. It's a huge task. But if you read too fast, you'll miss this part. God says this: bring a pair of every kind of animal, a male and a female, into the boat with you to keep them alive during the flood. Pairs of every kind of bird and every kind of animal and every kind of small animal that scurries along the ground will come to you. Noah didn't have to go and get them. They came to him. When God has given you a vision, resources will begin to come to you. All you have to do is cast the vision and give God your yes, and God will begin to work things out for you in your life. Well, Lord, I'm not a good enough speaker. God, I can't do this. Lord, I'm not made for this, or I don't have this, or all of these things, and we give God all our excuses. And God says, if you can just give me a yes, I'll begin to give you the things that you need. One of the things that I ran from and was most afraid of was to be the pastor of a church. I'll never forget, as I was going through, Church of God has something called MIP, Ministerial Internship Program. And as I was going through MIP, you do an internship at a church. And my pastor there, we would meet weekly. to discuss the things that I was learning. The MIP program through the Church of God, let me tell you, it's pretty intense. Because not only are you working a full-time job, you're also being a husband or a wife. We're raising children. So me and Danielle had 4 children. We're working full-time jobs. And if you are married, your spouse goes through it with you. So we're both going through this training program. We had books we had to read, papers we had to write, meetings we had to go to. It was a lot happening. And one of the weekly meetings, I'm sitting down with my pastor, and he's talking to me, and he kept saying this. When you pastor, you'll need to do this. I don't want to do that. When you pastor, you need to do this. I don't want to do that. When you pastor, you need to do this. And I said, I don't want to pastor. I'm cool being a youth pastor for a while. I won't even be an evangelist. I don't want to pastor a church. I'm not ready for that yet. And the thought of doing that scared me. And he would ask me, you don't want to be a pastor? No. You know God called you to do that? No. I'll do anything else. I don't want to do that. People's lives, people's souls are my responsibility. That's huge. I have to have a vision. I have to do this. I have to do that. I have to do all of these things. That's a lot of work. That's a lot of responsibility. That's a huge weight to have on me. I don't want that. I'm fine being a youth pastor. And me and God would have this conversation. God would tell me, you know, I've called you to pastor a church. I'm cool. I'm pastoring right now. I'm a youth pastor. And God would keep telling me, and I would keep saying, I'm cool right where I'm at right now. I don't have the knowledge, God. I don't have the experience, God. I'm afraid, God. And God kept saying, I've called you to be a pastor. And one day, God kept dropping these hints. I'm going to do this. 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 And it finally came and God said, I need you to do this. And the whole time, I was saying, Lord, I'm cool here. Lord, I'm cool here. I'm cool here. What I didn't realize was God was preparing me every step of the way. And when the time came and God said, now will you do this? I didn't have a list of excuses. I just said yes. As long as you make a way, as long as you provide, as long as you are with me, God, I'll do it. God is preparing you and making a way for you. This week I've been reading through the book of Exodus, and let me tell you something. The book of Exodus, Moses is a frustrating character. The children of Israel are frustrating people. And as I'm reading through the book of Exodus, I'm going to the beginning, and I'm looking at Moses, and God said, Moses, I'm calling you to deliver my people. And Moses is like, no, I can't do it. And God said, Moses, I'll be with you. Moses said, no, I can't do it. And God said, Moses, I'll give you a sign. Throw your staff on the ground and watch what happens. And he threw his staff, and a snake came out. And God said, now pick it up by the tail. And when he did, it became a staff again. And he said, now will you do it? And Moses was like, no, I can't do that. God, I'm not a good speaker. God, I'm a shy person. God, you've got the wrong one. I'm not that good of a guy. And God said, Moses, here's what I want you to do. Put your hand inside your cloak. And when he did, it said he became white with a skin disease. And God said, now put it back. And Moses put it back, and his hand was fine. And God said, now, Moses, I'm with you. Will you go? And you would think, after seeing all of that, Moses would have been like, absolutely, Lord, I know that you're with me. Moses' response was, God, I have a stuttering problem. I am not the person to do this. And finally, God got mad at him. I'm mad reading it. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? God is showing you that he is with you. He is giving you a sign. He's there with you. He's performing miracles in front of you. And yet you're holding back from God and telling him everything you're not. I'm not a good speaker. And God said, who made your mouth? Who made the deaf, the seeing, and the blind? Didn't I do it? And Moses said, well, God, please find someone else. How many of us are like, God, please find somebody else? God, please, not me. Not now. I'm not ready. And we begin to give God a list of everything that we're not. Thinking that the cost of the vision is too much. It's going to require my gifts. It's going to require my talent. It's going to require my time. It's going to require me to get my life together. It's going to require me to take some things out of my life that maybe I've been hiding and keeping secret, and I'm not ready to let go of. It's going to require me to do something that maybe I don't want to do, but yet the cost of not doing it. We don't think about that. What is the cost of not walking it out? What is the cost of not following the vision? What is the cost of not being everything that God has called you to be? How many people are not going to meet Christ because you didn't walk and do the thing God asked you to do? How many people walk around unhealed because you didn't do what God asked you to do? There is a mistake in my life, a time where I was disobedient to God, and I'll never forget it. It's like 10 years ago. And to this day, I remember it very clearly. Because the cost of not doing it cost me something great. At this time in my life, me and Danielle were, I can't say we're newlyweds, but we weren't like married for a long period of time, maybe only like 4 or 5 years. And if you're newlyweds and you're young, we got married at 23, we were young. At the time, we thought we had everything together. We're adults. We can handle this. We can get married. We can have kids. We had it all figured out. I look back now and realize I'm almost double the age that I was then. Not quite. I'm like, what was I thinking? So I was young. And when you're young and you think you know it all, and you get married and you have kids, guess what was one resource that you lack? Money. So I was young, I was dumb, and I was broke. That's the worst combination to be in life. But one thing I always knew to do is I knew how to get more money. There was never a shortage of money. I couldn't keep it, but I knew I always knew how to go get more. So I had a job, and then I had like side jobs. And then if I spent that money, one thing I would do is I would go and I would donate plasma. And I would do that regularly. I even had this whole thing figured out. If I donate plasma, I can get $400 a month if I go twice a week. That's my car payment right there. I had this thing down to a science. I was broke, but I knew how to get money. Didn't know how to keep it. But I could go get it. And so weekly, twice a week, I'd go to the plasma bank right before I go to work, and I would go donate plasma. I knew exactly what time I had to go there. I could do this express style. And so before work, I'd go and I'd donate plasma. I had my set days, I would go and I would donate plasma. And then you get to know the people at the plasma bank. So as I'm there, I'm standing in line, I'm donating. I'm not standing in line, I'm laying around, I'm donating plasma. God spoke to me right there. Because in order for me to go donate plasma, I had to go to a pretty sketchy part of town. It was not a good area. I would not ever let her go to this area of town, ever. Without me. Probably not even with me. It was not a good area. Super sketchy. And all kinds of people came through there. And I'm laying there, I'm donating plasma, and God speaks to me, and he said, I need you to pray for people in this building. And I said, God, is that you? What do you mean you need me to pray for people? He said, people in here need you. When you're done, I need you to ask who needs prayer, and I'll send them to you because you need to pray for them. And I said, God, no. Not me. I must not be hearing you right. Some of us, we know when God talks to us, but then we talk ourselves out of it. God, you're not, no, that's not God, that's me. I was watching this movie the other day. That's what it was. I was listening to a Bible podcast, and now I'm feeling extra spiritual. God, you're not talking to me. This is residual from that podcast. I was worshiping at home, and now I'm feeling extra spiritual. God, you're not talking to me. And we talk ourselves out of what God is telling us to do. God is commanding us to move forward, and yet we're sitting there saying, no, God, that's not me. No. Because vision is going to cost us something. It's going to cost me stepping out of my comfort zone. It's going to cost me being embarrassed for a little bit. It's going to cost me being uncomfortable. So I tell back and I talk myself out of it. God, you're not talking to me. It must just be my imagination. And God said again, I need you to pray for these people. They need you. I'll send them to you, but pray. And I'm sitting there and I can hear it. And I knew it was God because the more I tried to tune it out, the stronger I could feel it. And the stronger the weight was for me to do it. And I was dreading finishing donating plasma because that means that God was going to ask something of me. And so as soon as I finished, they wrapped me up and God said, now ask who needs prayer. And I couldn't get out the door fast enough. I ran to my car. God, it wasn't you. 10 years later, I look back and I can remember it vividly. And I remember the weight that I felt when God was asking me to do this. And I remember the guilt and the shame I felt sitting in my car knowing that there were people that needed Christ. And I ran away. The cowardness that I felt, knowing that I let people go. The Apostle Paul writes this. He says, I've preached the gospel to everybody. So in the end, there will be no blood on my hands. And as I sat in that car, I'm looking at my hands going, God, I know that's me. Who didn't I reach this day? Because I thought vision. I thought the plan. I thought the request was so great that I couldn't move forward. But the cost of not doing it was even greater. Pompano Beach Church of God, we have come a long way. We know what we stand for, but God said it's time for us to see where we're about to go. We spent weeks talking, casting vision with each other. And so for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to make the vision very plain. Is the vision going to cost us something? Absolutely. It's going to require some of us to get out of our comfort zones to make this happen. How many know a church's vision doesn't just rely on the pastor? You ever try to play a baseball game with one person? I'm going to pitch. I'm going to play first base, second base, third base, shortstop, outfield. I'm going to do it all. And I'm going to be the catcher. You can't do it. I don't care how good of a player you are. You cannot play every position. Nor are you meant to. I played Little League baseball. I was a great outfielder. Couldn't do anything else well, but I was a great outfielder. Don't put me anywhere else. Just leave me right there. How many of you know God has called you to a specific purpose? I may be the pastor, but I can't play every position. God didn't ask me to teach every class. Some of you guys have been called to teach. God didn't ask me to stand at the door and greet everybody because some of you, God has given you the gift of hospitality. God didn't call me to organize everything because some of you, God has given you the gift of administration. Some of you, God has called you to work with young people. But in order for the vision to come to pass, it requires all of us to step into what God is calling because we have a corporate vision. And I can't play every part. That's why the Bible says we are a body with many members. You can't look at any part of your body and say it's not important. My legs are vitally important to me. Let me tell you something. My legs are super important to me. But have you ever injured one of your fingers and you quickly realize how important your pinky finger is to the rest of your body when you can't use it? You ever injured your eye and you're down one eye? Let me tell you something. It becomes very apparent how important this one part of your body is. Have you ever stubbed your toe and you got a sore toe, and then you become very apparent how important it is. Every part of the body works together. And God has called us to work together as one body to accomplish one goal, and that is to see souls saved. But it can't be done on one person. We all have to come together. For the next couple of weeks, we're going to cast a vision for where we are about to go. You guys are in the car with me, but I'm about to tell you where we're going. I'm giving you guys the roadmap, and I'm showing you this is where we are about to go. This is the destination, and this is how we are going to get there. We are going in together. The vision of this house is going to cost us something. It's going to cost us our time. It's going to cost us our resources. It's going to cost us monetarily, but I promise you, when you give to God, God gives back. The Bible says, give and it shall be given unto you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, shall men give unto you. When you cast a vision, not only do it require something of you, but then God begins to give back to you. Noah didn't have to go find the animals. The animals came to him. Why? Because God provided the resources. When you cast vision, God begins to send the resources you need. When you give up something for God, something greater happens in return. The best example of the cost of a vision was Jesus Christ. How many know going to the cross cost him something? When we think of Jesus going to the cross, we think of Jesus and all of his godliness and all of his godly glory. It didn't faze him. He was good, right? He was God. We don't realize that at that point, God had turned his back on him and he was just like us. Human. Every stripe on his back he felt. Every punch he felt. Romans were masters of torture, and they could torture better than anybody. And the cross was designed to prolong death. And you died slowly and painfully. They knew where to hammer you to avoid major arteries, so you bled out slowly, not quickly. It was a mix between dying of asphyxiation because your lungs would fill up with fluid, or you would bleed out. Can you imagine Jesus beaten and broken, whipped with a cat of nine tails, to the point that on his back, bone and muscle tissues are exposed? And then you have to carry a 300-pound wooden, rugged cross up a hill. And then they put your beaten back on a splintered cross. And they were so bad with what they did. The only way for you to be able to breathe is you had to lift yourself up on the nails in your wrists and slide your broken back up that wooden cross just to get enough air to breathe before you sat back down again. The cross cost him something. We make excuses why we can't be obedient to God, but we think about Jesus and everything he went through. It cost him something. So much so that when he was in the garden praying, it said his sweat became drops of blood. He was under such mental anguish that he began to sweat blood. Imagine the amount of stress a man had to go through for that. The cross cost something. But the cost of not going to the cross, well, that was even greater. In order for me and you to have eternal life, Christ had to give up his. The cost of vision is great. The cost of disobedience is even greater. So as we move forward as a church, God has called us to have vision. And vision can be scary. When God calls you and asks you to do something, it can be scary. And we begin to tell God every reason why we can't do it. I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not holy enough. You don't know what I was just doing last night, God. How could you ask me something like this? I've heard this saying my whole life, and it stands true. God doesn't call the equipped, but he equips the called. God took people who weren't worth much of anything, and he made them something great. David was a shepherd and became a warrior and a king. Gideon led an army of 300 people to defeat an army of over 10,000 people. And Gideon was a coward. When you find him in the Bible, he's hiding. He's hiding from his enemies. And in the middle of hiding from his enemy, God calls him and he says, "You will be a great warrior, Gideon." Gideon's like, "You've got the wrong guy. I am literally hiding from my enemies. I am a coward. And you're telling me I'm going to be a great warrior." God doesn't look at on the outside. God doesn't look at everything we think matters. God knows what he put inside each and every one of us. God knows what he called you to. God knows what he put inside of you. You can't see it, but God said, "I know how great I've made you. I know what I've put inside of you. I know the things that are going on the inside, but I know what I can do." The Apostle Paul writes this. He says, "I joy and glory in my infirmities, for when I am weak, then he is strong." If I could do it on my own, I wouldn't need God. But I'm glad that I can't do it on my own because I got to rely on him. Every Sunday morning, I spend time in prayer with God because I realize that if I come up here without him, it's all over. I can't do this without him. I need him to move forward. I need him to breathe. I need him to preach. I need him to pastor. I need him to be a father. I need him to be a husband. I can't go without him. I'm weak. But it's okay to be weak. And it's okay to be afraid. And it's okay to not want to move forward. The apostles were weak and they were scared. David had moments where he was afraid. Abraham was afraid. Great men in the Bible, they were afraid. They were scared. They were weak. But let me tell you something. God is so great that in spite of our weakness, he can still perform miracles. God isn't concerned with how weak we are because he knows how great he really is. When Joshua took over Israel and became the new leader, God told him this: be strong and courageous. Don't be worried or afraid. And I'm asking you, Pompano Beach Church of God, will you stand with me and be strong and courageous? What we have going forward is going to be scary. We're going to enter into territory we've never been before. We're going to have to dream bigger than we've ever dreamed before. It's going to require more of us than it has before. But I'm asking you to be strong and courageous. Don't be worried or afraid. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it's being afraid and doing it anyway. So with knees shaking, stand. With fists clenched in fear, stand. God, I can only move a little bit at a time. Just move forward. God called me to preach, but I don't know what to say. Stand up behind the pulpit and just say God is good. Just do it. Do it afraid. Do it nervous. Do it scared. Do it unsure. Do it with doubt. But just do it and watch what God can do. Will you move forward with me? Will you stand with me? Will you be strong and courageous with me? Will you get in the vehicle and ride with me? We are on to something great. Every time people come into this place, contractors, strangers, they come into this building, they walk into this room, and they look around, and they say the same thing. How many places can this sit? And I say 500. And they say, I can see it full. I said, you can see what I see. You can see what I see. Not just full, but I see souls being saved.